Hey, this is P Funk, the bassist for Faithhead, and you're going to see me on Wild Man and Steve.
You are about to listen to the intersection of faith, talk, and music. The Wild Man and Steve show starts right now.
So, Steve, when I ask you, or not ask you, think, whatever, however you want to pose this, actually, we've been talking about for many episodes now the best way to open up a show, right? And we've been doing that by putting you on the spot. Almost every time I put you on the spot, ask some crazy question. And so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot again, but it's going to be in an adverse way, okay? Because you still don't know what's coming. You don't know what's coming, right? You don't know what's coming.
Let me just stop you right there. I'm not sure that
you can't stop. No. Hey, I'm the host. You can't stop me.
Listen. It's the Wild Man and Steve show. I can interrupt you when I want, and I'm pretty sure when you put me on the spot, it's always in an adverse way.
Okay. But what I'm trying to get at is I'm putting you on the spot this time by asking you to put me on the spot to open the show.
Oh, I like how you think.
I wonder if you probably weren't prepared for that, so that's why I'm in the clear.
Okay, no. I'm going to totally put you on the spot. Listen, this is a defining question, and this may end the Wild Man and Steve show right here. All right, I'm serious. This may end the Wild Man and Steve show right here. Hand tossed or deep dish when it comes to pizza?
Are you ready?
I'm waiting.
Okay. Thin crust.
Folks, we've enjoyed having all of you as listeners for the Wild Man and Steve show. Unfortunately, our show is now being brought to a close. We'd hoped to run for many more years, but since Wild Man clearly has the wrong taste in pizza, we are shutting down Wild Man and Steve Enterprises. Are you kidding me? Thin crust? What? Well, you put marinara on a saltine?
No. It's that crispiness on the edge. You don't get that with the others. And also you get those little small triangles. That way you don't realize how much you're eating, right? See, if you eat, like, let's say you eat 10 pieces of a regular pizza, man, everybody says, man, you get 10 pieces, those 10 of those squares, you're good.
I'll let you off the hook because your support for this was gluttony. And so basically you're using gluttony to support your answer, and I can get behind gluttony. Seriously,
you can wait. Wow. Did you just say you can get behind gluttony? Ladies and gentlemen, you heard that here first. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like for all of you to go to your social media page, our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, at Wild Man and Steve. And I'd like for you to rate that opening, that intro. Have we reached the pinnacle yet? And just put hashtag, what would be the hashtag? Hashtag great opening. Wild Man and Steve, hashtag great opening. And now this is the part of the show where I turn it over to Mr. Segway, who does a tremendous job of always giving a segue into the guests that we have. And we have an incredible guest with us tonight.
We do. But before we get to that, I've got a biblical trivia question for you, Pastor Wildman. Okay? What do you call it when you mix the youngest son of Jacob with a whole bunch of F-16 planes? The youngest son of Jacob in the Old Testament and a whole bunch of F-16 planes.
Tell me what you got.
Benny and the Jets.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still listening out there, we do want to welcome today Benny Hester to the program. Benny has had an incredible career for a very long time, an incredible singing career, and we're going to talk about a lot of that and a lot of what's going on. Benny, how are you doing today? Welcome to the program.
Great, Wildman. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Benny.
Yeah. It is an honor to have you. And, you know, one of the things that I typically do anytime we have a guest on the show, like your name was basically a household name in my home growing up. And when I was in high school, we listened to a Christian contemporary station. So we would always hear Benny Hester song. And I always, when I get excited, when we've started interviewing a lot of people from that era, I always like to look and see, well, what are they doing? What's this like? And it's always surprising to me that from a fan standpoint, we always see a few years where you did something that was very popular and everybody knew it. But from your standpoint, this has been going on your whole life. So talk to us about what was it? Was there a time where it just was like a lightning bolt that said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? When did it become obvious you were going to be doing this as a career?
Well, I was born in Texas, and I studied classical music I started when I was 4, from some very strict European teachers, John Ruther and his wife. And so as I got into high school, I was, of course, part of the band and all that. But I got involved and helped put together a rock band. And the band was called the Morticians. And in high school, our band became very popular throughout Texas and throughout the South. And it really got me interested in pop culture. And I grew up, I want to say, in a pretty poor home. And I got influence from other people. Like when I went to high school, I went to school with people who did things that I never dreamt of doing. And as I would look at the LPs that my friends in the band would get, it made me catch on to all the things that were happening around the world. And they were very plugged in, and it was great. I moved from Texas to Las Vegas, where I taught music for a very short time, and took a tour through a recording studio, United Recording. And I met a guy by the name of Brent Mayer. Brent was the house engineer. And I was just doing a walkthrough. I had asked somebody, hey, could I just take a look at the studio? The only other studio I had ever seen was Norman Petty's studio in Clovis, New Mexico. He produced gosh, who all did he produce? Buddy Holly, for one.
Oh, wow.
So that would be great. And that was my first recording session that I ever had. But I took the walkthrough. Brent Mayer said, hey, what do you do? What do you like to do? And I said, I write songs. And he said, well, sit down and play me one. And I had a spiral notebook of all my songs. I took them out, and it's called The Good Book. And that was my collection of songs. And I had a second one called The Better Book. And so as a young songwriter, I just had all these songs lined up, and I played him one, and he went, wow, do you have another one? So play it to me. And so I did, and we got to be very good friends, and he ended up producing me. And I got to know Bill Porter, who was a legend at that time. He recorded so many hit songs of the era, and he was Elvis Presley's sound man. And he invited me. We sat many times, watched Elvis's concerts while he mixed them. I sat at the console, and it was quite a thrill. I didn't know a lot about Elvis. My older brother knew a lot, but I was, able to watch them play each night. And I knew the players that Elvis had hired: Ron Tutt, James Burton, Jerry Sheff, Glenn Hardin. They were the top LA studio players that were cutting all the songs with Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, The Carpenters, Seals and Crofts, Cat Stevens, you name it, whoever was popular at the time. So he introduced me to the band, and they ended up being the first band that I had in the studio to actually record my very first album. And Brent and Bill signed me to my first recording contract. So that got me kicked off. And, there were a lot of twists and turns after that, but it was a lot of fun.
Though some know me well, still nobody knows me like you.
It's so fascinating, I think, to us. I mean, we're huge music fans. We wouldn't be doing this show. And I think the people who listen are also huge music fans. And so it's so neat to hear people's stories. And for some people, it's, well, my mother and father were musical and they always played instruments in the house, or I grew up in the church choir, or so it's so neat to hear those kinds of stories. Now, but you mentioned your initial band, or the band, the Morticians. Now you use the term a rock band, and certainly I'm hearing the name, the Morticians, and I'm going, okay, that name and rock band, and I'm going,
right.
But the music I associate with you is not necessarily the same genre. So how did you bridge from one to the other there?
Well, it was a rock band. I mean, we were playing the Stones and the Beatles and all those kinds of songs that everyone knew then, that you probably grew up with. I did, and so we did it because we love the music, and so I wanted to write songs eventually. At that time, I was just a beginner, and occasionally I would slip a song in one of our sets, and it was terrible. And I did it anyway, and the guys would play along with me, and it was great. But the music, it really sort of gave me a background for all the songs that I did write. Like, people know my ballads, that a lot of my ballads from radio, because the CCM, radio really took to a lot of those songs. But songs like Rubber Canoe and some of the other rock songs that I did many. I like to always have the juxtapose, where you'd have some great songs that you could catch on to as a ballad, and you'd have some real rockers. So it sort of set the foundation for me, early on.
Rubber canoe, ocean will beneath me in my rubber canoe. To weather the rage, that's all I could do. To Jesus, I gave my life to you. Rubber canoe, ocean will beneath me in my rubber canoe. To weather the rage, that's all I could do. To
So as you look back across your career, and if I may ask, how many years have you been doing this professionally now?
Well, I was playing classical music and giving demonstrations and all of that when I was very young. But 1966 was, and 65 and 66 were the years that I started my rock band. So once I started doing that, I just continued on. I had a duo for a while in El Paso, Texas, and in Amarillo, and it was called Hester and Hilton. I had a partner, and I wrote all the songs, but we sang them together, and he was just fabulous. And I was in a musical for 2 years called Texas, a big extravaganza musical. And that gave me some other experience that I'd never had before. So, I did a lot of things musical. It sort of never really stopped once I got going. I just did different things until I ended up here.
So are there one or two, or maybe just a few, or maybe one highlight that sticks out in your mind when you look back across all that you've accomplished? Is there a memory that sticks out that says, that's really something that tells me I was doing something to change somebody's life, or anything like that? Is there anything?
Uh-huh.
Well, what can you share with our listeners that from your personal standpoint,
Right.
something that really touched you?
Well, as a songwriter writing contemporary Christian music, I actually started in 1972 when I recorded the album with Elvis's band. I was reading the Bible, and I was really searching at that time for some meaning in life. I lived in Las Vegas. I hated it from the second that I landed there and got off the plane. In fact, I wrote a song about it called Streets of Las Vegas that really just tells the step-by-step story of what happened to me. But there were many Christians from a traveling crusade that were in town, and they were there for about a year. And they gave tracts to everybody. If you stopped at a light on the strip, they would just hand you a tract through the window. And, I was flipping through those. And I knew that people were already doing songs that had some spiritual element to it, like Seals and Crofts were Baha'i faith, and they were writing songs that had these elements of their faith in it. And Cat Stevens did the same thing. And so when I listened to those songs, they seemed to have a higher purpose, but I didn't really catch on or buy into, their faith. I was reading the Bible because, I had grown up where I'd gone to church, and, I would say that it just didn't take, but I was reading the Bible, and I wrote a song called We All Know He's Coming. That's about the return of Christ. And we recorded it as a part of that very first album in 1972. And the other songs, there were maybe 3 other songs that had spiritual elements to it or content to it that, at least to me, for the time that I was at that time, it really had a great deal of meaning to me spiritually. And I saw it affect the players when we were sitting in the studio and we were sitting there playing those songs. I saw it affect the players themselves, and they began to talk to me about it. And as a matter of fact, Ron Tutt, Elvis's drummer, traveled with me for 4 years, playing Christian music. He recorded 3 albums with me, and was just terrific in being a part of almost everything I'd done up through about 1986 or so. And he went and played with Neil Diamond after that. He left my band to play with Neil Diamond, and he stayed with Neil till Neil stopped touring recently. So that was one of the biggest things, just the fact that I was sitting in the studio with those guys, and I was going through a transformation personally. And soon after that, the studio caught on fire, and the records were pressed and ready to be sent out. And promos had already been placed in Billboard magazine. the single was going to be "We All Know He's Coming." It was already pressed. I still have a few of them on the 45 at that time, and they had everything, just the entire promotion tour, everything, and the studio burned down with all of the LPs and vinyl in the warehouse next to it. It was one of the biggest fires in Las Vegas, and I was woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they just said, "Come over here as fast as you can." We saw people, people looting, some of the albums out the back door and that kind of thing. Then I think some of them got out and they're traded now. But, I was able to release that album in 2016 on a remaster, and you can get it on Apple and hear the whole album.
You were talking about some of the spiritual lyrics. You mentioned, Seals and Crofts, certainly Cat Stevens we think about. And I think about some others. In fact, I've been listening to some more obscure 70s stuff lately. And why do you think, I want to think about this in two ways. Why do you think it seemed to me, that you could have bands bring in more substantive and spiritual lyrics and not necessarily be pigeonholed as a Christian band, but just part of lyrics is part of what you did. You seem like you had more of that kind of thing maybe in the 60s and 70s than you do now. And to me, it's like, well, somebody's going to mention, it's almost if you're going to mention God in your lyrics, and that immediately puts you off in the Christian pigeonhole. Why do you think that was, if I'm correct in
Well, it caught my attention, and I didn't really know a lot about it. I became a Christian in 1973, soon after that fire. Somebody invited me to a tent meeting. I went, and I was one of the people who came forward at the end of the night, and it changed my life. It changed everything that I had planned, everything I wanted to do. I still wanted to be in music. I was only interested, though, in reaching people who would not be in a church. In Las Vegas, that was really easy because everywhere, I played in all kinds of venues and parks and all kinds of things. And I was playing songs that had spiritual content to it. And, I think a lot of it is in, one, your writing style and what you feel your purpose is. And I really had never wanted to play churches or to be caught or pigeonholed in a, like you say, a Christian, if you use Christian words, then you're, that's what you are. And so, you can't get out of that. But I always wanted just to appeal to someone who was sitting on the edge of the stage, or, wherever they might be in their life. They were looking at me, and they were caught by the song and then began to think about what was being said. And it always appealed to me. And why other people, got into that area, I don't know. I think it's just a natural process. If you're talking about Seals and Crofts and Cat Stevens and people like that, it's just a natural. They were songwriters to start with, great songwriters, and those elements were a part of their life. So it just transitioned to their music.
I mentioned earlier about being a household name, and the one song that comes to mind when I hear your name is "When God Ran." and I just had to go there tonight, knowing you were going to be on the show. Can you give us just some background? I mean, obviously, we know that it was the prodigal son story that motivated you, but
Yeah.
what personally motivated you to write that song from that perspective? You know, the only time I saw God ran was just
Right.
a moving statement alone.
Right. Well, first, I really did like the twist on the song. It's the only time I saw God run, and so that did mean something to me. But when I started the album Benny from Here, what I wanted to do was I wanted to take some messages that I'd heard from pastors that I knew, that I was friends with. Some I was friends with, some I wasn't, but I really took some of their sermons and I wrote songs that kind of based on them. Like I did that with Greg Laurie, who's a very good friend of mine. You may know him. He's got New Beginning, which is a radio program that goes all over the world. And we did hundreds and hundreds of concerts together. And we did a lot of Easters together. I would say for, 10 years, we did Easter services together. And he said, hey, why don't you write a song? He came out of an empty tomb to fill our empty hearts. And I said, well, okay, maybe I will. And so later I thought about it and I did. I wrote the song. And I had other pastors, Oswald Chambers is one of my favorites. Chuck Smith was my pastor, so I really was influenced by him. But I heard a young pastor in Las Vegas, John Parenti, who was my drummer in 1978. And I would say 77, 78. He cut my first album on Spirit, which was Sparrow Records at the time, with me. And then he went on to become a pastor, and Ron Tutt traveled with me. But he had written this sermon. I heard it. I was really touched by it. I said, hey, give me a printout of some of your sermon titles. I would just like to see what they are. I hadn't had a chance to hear them, but I just wanted to see what his titles and what his interests were. When God Ran was one of those, and I just said, wow, that is an idea I want to write. And so what I did was I just wanted to start and make a description the best I could of God. All the words that signified who God was, how powerful he was, all the names that you could think of. And then I wanted to turn that corner and just show, how loving and tender and forgiving God was. And that was the purpose. Luke 15:11. That was really the story.
Sure. Well, to this day, I mean, that song, the message, if I could go on a limb here and say that's a timeless number, it's a timeless message, we know, but I would say that's a timeless song as well. It doesn't matter what era we're in, that song fits, just the whole idea of the only time I saw God ran, took me in his arms, held my head to his chest, said my son's come home again. That's
the personal
powerful,
right.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And it painted a picture, and that's what I wanted to do. And I hope that I tens of thousands, and I might say hundreds of thousands of letters, emails, messages of all kinds regarding that song, about where people pulled over the side of the road, or how it touched their lives, or changed their family, or changed their situation. And it was just a point of connection that they had with God. And, I really enjoy reading those, and I really appreciate it.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, Wildman and I've got a friend that I believe a fellow named Mark Middleburg.
Oh, yes. I know Mark.
So Mark is, for our listeners, they well know Mark from his books. He's an evangelist, apologist. Right. And I know one of the things that Mark is so keen on is seeing a winsome, he often uses that word, a winsome presentation of the gospel.
Uh-huh.
And I think about that with this song. And one of the things listeners to our show will know, if they've listened to very many episodes, so many artists will talk about, for me, it's not about the record sales. It's not about the number of people at the venue, where I played and so forth. It's about making that connection. Exactly what you were saying with the song, that somebody might not have had with Jesus in another way. They might not have picked up in maybe a traditional way. But there they are driving along, like you said, maybe driving along, here we are in the night, they hear this song and that comes to them. Talk to us a little bit about your experience of that with other, and maybe we'll go ahead and say particularly CCM artists. Particularly in the heyday of CCM, it really seemed that there was that evangelistic component. People really did seem to care. Are we picking up on that correctly? Is that what you experienced as someone who was in that at that time?
Right. I really came from a completely different vantage point. Like, being in Las Vegas, the Jesus movement was happening on the West Coast all over. And, I was sort of cut off in the desert, but something was happening there too. And it was just a little bit different. And, you had to, I had lived there for 10 years and I knew the surroundings, and you just have to not be bothered by it. You just have to say, I'm going to take the gospel into a place that it may never go. If I don't play here or play this concert, I've had beer bottles thrown at me at the Las Vegas Convention Center because I was playing a Christian song and they wanted to hear something else, or hear me play something different. But I went to San Francisco after my first album came out in 1978. And the only reason I went there is because we stayed right at Berkeley. I brought the whole band and a big entourage up there. We hooked up with a guy named Mario Murillo, who was a pastor in that area. And he really was into the college and college kids at that time. And that appealed to me. And we played the Oakland Auditorium multiple nights. We played the Golden Gate Park, all these iconic places. And we just were able to see thousands of people come to Christ in just some way that I really had envisioned early on. But, it's really easy as you write songs to move more and more to more of a lockdown. The record company needs this for this station or for this, market or whatever. And they let you know what those things are. And you just try to accommodate them. For me, it was a challenge. And, I just wanted to write the best song I could every time and convey the message in the best way I could. I hope that answered, what you were asking. Sure. But, I only started doing it because I wanted it to be an evangelical. I had never thought before about playing churches for a living. It just never occurred to me. It never went through my head. And so for a long time, as things, grew, I saw that, I played the big festivals and all that. Those were kind of cool because a lot of different kinds of people came to those. And, but I really did want to be evangelical. And I think probably I would say most of the CCM artists that I knew at that time, I think they had the same idea in their head,
Yeah.
I was going to say, because again, listening to that, and I don't know if you would agree with that, Wildman, that it seemed that way, I think, to us as listeners, as fans, right. It seemed that way. If I could just kind of take that on now, and truly not in a leading sort of way, I'm just curious what your thought is as a multi-decade professional musician with that evangelistic focus. Do you see that as the driving purpose of whatever we might consider contemporary Christian music today? And obviously we've got so many wonderful genres, and from hard rock and doom metal and gangster rap and what have you in terms of those styles of music. But do you still see that as the driving motivator behind the music that's out there today, in terms of the Christian music that's out there today?
Yeah. The quick answer is yes, I do.
Good.
You know, the music changed. You know, like I had a great church in Las Vegas called the Neighborhood Church in Henderson, and it was terrific. And I went there and tried my songs out. A lot of times, if I was writing a new song, I could play it in my church and see how people, you know, reacted to it or what they thought about it. But I also led worship there a lot. But that was never my calling. I'm not a worship leader. I can lead worship, and, you know, I've done it many times, you know, a little bit at my concerts, but music changed a great deal. And I'm going to say, as we got in to the early 90s, you probably know better, maybe better than I do, but it started changing to worship music mostly. And artists were doing worship music 100%. And for me, that was kind of tough because I wouldn't really ever stand up and do a whole concert of worship music. I'm really a songwriter first. And I sing because I just need somebody to present my song, and that was it, you know? And so that's why. And so I guess the answer is yes. I think everybody starts off, or at least everybody I knew started off for it to be evangelical. Let's reach people, some new people who don't know the lingo, who don't come to my church, you know, never would, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, we've heard this from many artists that we've interviewed about how the music has changed, or the music did change around that same time that you're speaking of. Just curious, why do you think that happened? Do you have any thoughts on what caused that change?
Well, I've never had anybody ask me that question. I'm thinking that the body of Christ needs songs to strengthen them, bolster them, songs they can walk away singing. There is a real purpose in that. I mean, a great purpose. Yeah. And when it's done right and not diluted, you know, like, it's really hard for me to sing a bad song, you know, to be in my church and for somebody to be trying out new worship music, and it's just not very well written. It doesn't stick with you, and it creates a lot of hurdles. I don't know if everybody thinks that way. Yeah. But I do know something about advertising. I had a company for 10 years that did that in Las Vegas. And I did, you know, almost everything on radio and television there for those 10 years, commercial jingles and, you know, all of that type of thing. And I had to learn, by virtue of doing that, a lot about advertising. You know, people let down when they hear music. They don't have a natural defense against those words. And those lyrics and melodies. And so, you know, the normal stop sign isn't really there. So worship music has a great purpose. You know, it's just that some people are cut out to do it really in a great way, and they're really good at it. And other people, you know, and I would say I probably fall in the category that I write songs, and the songs I even write now, you know, I write songs. I write almost every day. I don't write every single day, but those songs are really about, you know, reaching people that wouldn't be singing those worship songs, because a lot of them, they wouldn't know what they are talking about. Like the lyrics to the songs, you know, Come to Jesus and all I mean, I'm sure you've heard this from other artists. Like, you know, whenever you're singing a worship song, it's for you as a believer.
Yeah.
And, you know, so a lot of times, you know, that puts other people off. So I've always been interested in reaching them. And I think that's where CCM really started. I mean, when I think of the very earliest. And I knew nothing about any of those things. In 1972, when I wrote We All Know He's Coming, about the return of Christ, I didn't know any of those things. I was just reading the Bible on my own, myself. And I just, then I did get into a great church once I was saved, and I, you know, I started learning about all those things, worship songs that were great. And,
Yeah.
My church here, Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa in California, had, maybe the best worship music I had ever heard, and maybe that's ever been made, probably.
Yeah.
So on that same line, understanding that a change in the music scene was made for whatever reason, I guess multiple reasons. What would be your advice today to a young musician who wants to do basically what you did and what others did in this day and age, when that's not really the mainstream necessarily? What would be your advice to someone who feels called to write music in that way?
I would say, look for a place that you have an avenue and a venue to put it. And that's the toughest thing. Like artists like myself, can I still write a hit song? Yeah, I think so. And do I have some already written? Maybe. And but you have to have a venue. Record company models have changed. It's not the same as it used to be. They're still out there. People are self-publishing things. That's some people are really great at it. I'm probably not, but there are people who really know how to do that in a great way. I would say, you just you sit down, you write the best song you can, figure out who that song is for, who's your audience, and then do everything you can to get that in the pipeline that will reach those people.
Okay. Good.
And, other than that, I'm not sure. I would just say persevere, because there's a lot of ups and downs if you're going to be a songwriter.
Sure.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, man, you basically, you were kind of thinking where I was going to go, because I wanted to ask that question as well, as we have asked of other artists. And I want to connect that also with something you were saying earlier, Benny. You mentioned about being in a musical, and as soon as you I think you said for a couple of years, immediately that made me think of Les Carlson, the lead singer from Bloodgood, who was in the touring company of Hair. Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, who was in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right.
And then also you just were mentioning about doing, marketing and advertising and so forth. So you've had your hand in a lot of different aspects of the entertainment business. How helpful has that fact been, kind of the diversity of experience? How helpful has that been to you specifically as a performer? And kind of separating that from the songwriter aspect, but to you as a performer.
Well, I have to say, in Texas, the musical Texas, I wasn't a singer. I wasn't an actor. I never was very good at acting or any of that type of thing. But I was the head of the band that they had. And they had quite a few musicians. And I was going to Texas Tech. My roommate had been in this musical before, and he said, they need somebody just like you who can play. I played a keyboard that was very unusual, that was called a chromatic keyboard. And he said, they'll hire you, because he had heard me play some small concerts and all. And so they hired me sight unseen, and I went, just sight read the music, memorized it, and did the whole show. And I could just do it on autopilot. So that didn't do much for my singing. And the same in Las Vegas, I started a company called Musad. and it started in 1970, and quite by accident. The radio station, there were two really large radio stations in Las Vegas. One was Keno Radio, and KLUC. And a couple of brothers owned the KLUC. They were upstairs, and they just said, hey, could you guys write us a radio identification package? And we have some clients. And so they just kept coming to us, and Brent and I formed this company, and we wrote these songs, and it was just great. Again, that was more songwriting. It really wasn't so much that I did sing a good number of those commercials, and people sure got tired of hearing them in Las Vegas during that era, but it was a learning process. And, I did those things, whether it was the musical or whether it was the commercial song company. Those things were to just buy time until I could finally come to Hollywood or come someplace. I had never expected to enter the record business in Las Vegas. I just never thought that would happen. That wasn't where I thought it happened. And, the studio was just, one of the few things that were there that connected you to the rest of the music business, around the world. So to me, it was buying time till I could get to where I could record and sing and all that. And I was just learning my craft. I was hopefully just getting better and better. And as I sang the commercials, it gave me a lot of recording experience. We did hundreds and hundreds, almost all the hotels, banks, trendy clothing companies, you name it, we did all of that.
Hard road. You made it this far, but the trip's been rough. Now it's getting near dark, and you can't see well enough. Headlights on the highway, that is what I wanna be. Headlights on the highway, just to help you see. Just to help you see. Out on the turnpike.
Well, Benny, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here. We just said this on another show, sometimes it's like we don't have enough time with all the avenues and questions we want to get into with artists, because we would just love to pick your brain for hours, because we hear a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. So we thank you for being with us. But can you tell us, or tell our listeners, any plans you currently have music wise?
Well, I still record some songs. I do it primarily for myself, and when the opportunity arises, or if it does, I'll put those songs out there. Occasionally, I preview a new song on my Facebook page, so you can look me up on Facebook and see some of those things. And I just had Nobody Knows Me Like You, one of my songs, recorded by someone else, go to the #1 position on iTunes in Canada. This was just a couple of months ago.
Wow.
And a few months ago, I learned also that a European company in Amsterdam is a big film company. They just won an Academy Award for their last film that they did. And they're going to use part of my life story and my music, some of my music, in the newest film that they're doing. They're already in production for it right now. And it probably won't be out till 2023. But, those are things that I'm looking forward to. And, those are the kinds of things I like. My wife and I were in television for a while, a few years, and we produced a hit show, and we learned a lot about that area. And I like my music to transition, and maybe it's in keeping with my evangelical roots, I like my music to cross those boundaries and go to places that they normally wouldn't,
Sure. Well, that is great. You're definitely an encouragement, and doing what you do for so many years and continuing to do it, and still never losing the evangelical mindset. That's very inspiring. That's what we're all about here with this show, and that's what we want to encourage as many as possible. Because, as Steve alluded to, that during that time it was kind of at the peak in the CCM in the '80s era. But, many people look at that, not many, but I've heard some look at that era and talk and kind of poke a little fun at the CCM, the Christian rock, the Christian music. But God used that time and in incredible ways and touched many souls. And I think he still wants to do that. And I still think he wants to do that through music.
I think he does too. I've watched some of your shows, and I have to say you are doing that. And, you guys are both. You're bringing up subjects, you're bringing artists on and people related to CCM that I really believe there should be a great deal of interest.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Yeah, we do what we can. Sometimes Steve gets on my nerves a bit, but we he
does. We would never say that about you. I'm positive.
Of course not. It was such an honor to have Benny Hester on our show. He is an amazing songwriter, and his songs have touched many lives, including myself. He mentioned tonight that he has received thousands and thousands of messages stating how much his songs have meant to his listeners. As you heard, all of his songs are about one thing, Jesus. All he writes about is Jesus. This is a need today. Today we need to hear more and more people writing with a passion about the person of Jesus. He is not just a person that lived 2,000 years ago. He is alive today. He can be alive in your life as well. How can this be? Simply ask, Jesus, I want you in my life. Show me what this means. And he will be faithful to do so. The Wild Man and Steve Show is now partnering with New Release Today. Find out more about them at newreleasetoday.com. And don't forget to check out our website, where you can also leave us a review at wildmanandsteve.com. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.